Oh, here we go. So first speaker, and this is going to be a nice tag team from CI Financial. We have Arvin Kachadorian, and he's currently a manager of data and analytics on the service enablement team at CI Financial. And he has spent his time at CI being part of various service-oriented teams. And so he's coming with a wealth of knowledge. And Arvin and his team, they've spent the last 2 years building the data and analytics function in CI's service center. So awesome. They've played a very critical role in the data and designing interactive dashboards. So major impact to the organization. And we have Nigel Weiser, and I've known Nigel for years. So he's super knowledgeable. I don't need to actually read his bio. But if you know, he's been speaking at GTACC conferences for years. He's always leading edge. And so here, let me read the official part. Nigel is Director of Service Enablement, CI Financial. And at CI, him and his team, they've worked on all areas of contact center, from knowledge management, workforce organization, projects, initiatives, voice of the customer, and anything to help the contact center move forward. And this is a good part here. I love, in the past 3 years, CI has taken their contact center from manual Excel-based tracking to a full cloud-based data lake architecture that serves up crucial data to business leaders in real time. And you are in great hands, real wonderful people sharing with you today, full of knowledge. I know there's going to be valuable takeaways. So I turn the floor over to you, wonderful men. And also, by the way, there are spots they've put in their talk where we can open up conversation and have some question and answer. Okay, so if you want to, you can click on a speaker view, because we have everything wide open. You can click on speaker view if you just want to see who's speaking at the time, Arvin or Nigel. Okay, go ahead, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sangeeta. And I often find with an intro like that, how do you follow up to that and also live through it? But yeah, I can't thank you enough, and just wanted to share my distinct pleasure and satisfaction, or I guess just honestly honor, to be here today to share with you our journey. As Sangeeta said, I've had an opportunity to be part of these forums in years past, and just to have a chance to get back in front of you all is absolutely awesome.
Yeah, and I'm excited. It's my first time presenting for GTACC, so super excited to share some of our journey and some of what we learned. So hopefully we can, help you guys walk away with some insights and things to think about too.
Sure. So when Arvin and I sat down and we were thinking through what do we share today, as I mentioned, or I guess as Sangeeta mentioned, over the last 3 years, we've gone through a pretty wild transformation and across our organization. Today, we're going to focus specifically on the contact center journey, but honestly, it has been absolutely amazing to see where we went from about even as short as 2.5 to 3 years ago to where we're standing today. And you'll find that you'll hear the theme throughout this presentation that it's continuing beyond where we speak from today's vantage point. As we want to take you through some of the learnings and the lessons that we've gathered along the way, we've picked up on 3 distinct themes that you're going to find permeate throughout the presentation. Beginning with ever growing, we want you to really keep in mind that beginning on a data journey and going down this path, it almost will never stop in terms of the new possibilities and options that are coming in front of you. Whether you're iterating on dashboards, developing net new ideas, that constant ever growing or iteration is a mentality that we've started to become a real muscle for us. Next, feedback. If you think about the fact that data in itself is only really as powerful as the users in the hands that you put it in, feedback becomes absolutely critical, because we need to make sure that what we're creating in a data world or a data perspective is actually meeting the mark for what our end users need. And then ultimately at the end of this train, thinking through the creativity side of it, when you think about the fact that in a world even 2.5 years ago where everything was so manual and it took so much time to put pieces together, you really only scratch the surface of the types of problems that you'd ever address. When you build this fulsome data strategy, you begin to find that the world is your oyster, and a lot of problems that were really sort of beyond your ability to tackle before come right into privy. But that requires also a new approach and a new way to think through problems. And that's why I also wanted to focus on just the creative aspect. But before we get too deep into the presentation, I know we wanted to show this, right?
Yeah, and Nigel, honestly, it's just about kind of like we're still very early in our journey, and although we've made some good progress, it's still there's a long way to go. But in such a short amount of time, we've been able to get to a point where we have interactive and that automated dashboards that we're using to make decisions. So today again, we're hoping to kind of walk you through that journey of how we've got here and like kind of where we're planning on going to next as well.
But I guess before we go exactly to where we're at today, let's take a look in our rear view. So, the impetus of this journey, and I'm sorry if we overuse that word in the presentation, but the impetus of this really came from the state that you're seeing here presented on the screen. We were a very siloed organization. Essentially, the users of the tools would be the owners of the data, and they interacted with that data specifically, but it didn't really get shared out very broadly. Anytime we wanted to actually interact with it, you would find that it would take some time and it would take a lot of manual intervention in order to develop the dashboards or graphs or charts or even just perspectives that we were trying to get to. And because of those first two facts, that led to an element of inconsistency. Who was building it? When were they building it? What type of export did they use? And this actually started to create even different perspectives in the way that we were looking at our data. And I think this equation, as you build your way across, this ultimately equates to a very resource intensive practice. Depending on the day, depending on the ask, you could have a small army of people working in concert to try and put together a single analysis. And I think for us, that's where we started to say, there's got to be a better way to do this.
Yeah, and honestly, just echoing that, it's these 4 points that were kind of like the 4 big areas that we really wanted to try to tackle, because me myself, just going in my career in client services, again, I felt a lot of these sometimes, right? So there was a lot of different teams would be working with the data, and occasionally you would find that depending on how you're running a report on a certain tool, or who's running it, you might have inconsistencies. And generally, to ask a question and to answer a question, you might take a lot of resources and work. So, and I remember even, Nigel, I think it was like one of our first months together, there was an ask that came through to kind of summarize what happened in our center for the year. And this was quite a bit of work. It took a couple of weeks to complete. I had to talk to multiple teams, run multiple reports, do a lot of checks just for accuracy, just to get that finished product. Knowing this and like kind of keeping that in mind, and knowing that that's a reoccurring activity, as we gathered and built a data team, we got to a point where we built a dashboard that would address that same request and answer it even better, but on a monthly basis. And something that would take us weeks to complete only took us an hour to complete. And now we've gone into fast forwarding to like more recently, we've gone to a point where that hour has been cut down to 0, and that same information is being populated by itself for at least some of the elements, which is really cool.
And you're taking a yearly analysis that was, again, weeks of work, and now you've condensed it down to 0. And just think of the power of having access to that throughout the year. And that's, I think, where, we started to get the proof points that there was something more here and we should start to invest more time. There we go. Now, the thing we wanted to start with, when you're beginning down this path, you've sort of realized, okay, we have an opportunity here. There's a few key things we wanted to highlight as being core and I think fundamental to the success of the program. First, being developing a North Star. So I think with any good strategy, any good business project plan, you need to understand what you're trying to deliver from a benefit perspective. What issues are you trying to overcome? And I think being that look in the rear view slide that we showed you prior, it gives you a pretty good idea of just the reasons that we thought, okay, we need to do some more here. And we honed in on those pieces around consistency, reducing the manual effort, and essentially driving collaboration across our teams. The next piece I have to highlight, and this one is probably the most critical of all of them on the page, it's finding the right people. I know you guys weren't on the show right before it started, but I was even saying to Sangeeta just how thankful I am to have someone like Arvin on the team. And it doesn't stop there. Associates of his, Jeff Evans, Vivek Suresh, having people that not only understand it, are technical, and they can drive value, but they live it and they breathe it. I don't know if you'd like me to admit this, Arvin, but I know that you were doing research on your personal time because it was something that was interesting to you. And with the amount of learning that needs to go into this and the amount of passion, I can't implore you enough to get the right people on the team, because that's going to breathe life into this. And really, I guess it would be Arvin and team that have sort of lived out the far right-hand side in terms of the art of the possible. I come to Arvin with, I'm sure, harebrained, crazy ideas at times, and it's Arvin's job to then say, okay, how do I translate that into something that's actionable? And living in that space in their minds, I think, has been, again, the reason that we're not getting stuck in any particular one situation. We're always seemingly able to work through any bind, no matter how hairy it might be.
And yeah, 100%. And Nigel, all of this is like, this kind of was kind of like our groundwork, what we knew, what we set up. And so once we have everything organized, everything understood, it's our first step ends up becoming is finding all of our data. And I don't know if you could change the slide to the next one. There we go. No worries. Our first step was finding all the data. And to be honest, until you actually went to go and look for it, is you didn't realize how much information you had. So as a new team trying to figure out, hey, like everything we had access to, it was quite a bit of work, and it took up a lot of time just kind of meeting with different users of the data, finding different sources, and really trying to figure out what we had access to. You know, first finding all that data was like the initial step, but then the following step, which took up quite a bit more work, was, you know, really understanding and cleaning that information. And look, this is upfront work that had to be done, and I know Nigel can attest to it. I'm a planner, so I like to really work a lot up front, and just to make sure like my following stages work a lot better. And I remember, I know Jeff and myself, we kind of worked really hard up front and just kind of figuring out what we had access to. And so one of the exercises that helped us the most was cataloging. And so we pretty much listed off all our sources in an Excel document, all the fields we had in it, and figure out the use case for the data. Because just because we have a lot of data doesn't mean all of that is useful. And so it's really about finding the most relevant items and making sure you're using them in a consistent manner going forward. And then what this kind of led to is like having like source packages of data that we'd constantly refer to in dashboards we were building. So I know, again, I'm going to keep referring to Jeff. He was like our mastermind there, and like he building like a package of data that would speak to multiple dashboards, and that source would just have to be updated, and it would automatically update all of our dashboards at the end. So anything we were sharing from the data team would be consistent information across the board. And then the final step is, once you have all of this understood, once you have everything cleaned, your next step is trying to find ways to connect that data. And that's really when you kind of start getting some really cool insights and some really meaningful value out of it too. And like, just imagine like connecting your telephony information with your training information, with your quality assurance information. And, you know, that might help you understand how effective your trainings are, or if there are specific areas that you can kind of improve in. So this is, again, all that upfront work that takes a lot of time, but really down the road adds a lot more value. And I don't know, Nigel, if you want to add anything else that I may have missed regarding this upfront work.
Awesome job. And, you know, for me, reflecting on that, I remember just being mind completely blown when you guys first started showing us the spreadsheets of what was out there. So I think this is such a critical step, because you can drown. There's so much available to us, depending on which systems we're using, that taking stock up front you need it, because it basically becomes your a la carte menu when you're creating these dashboards going along the lines. Now, with that said, we've kind of started with a bit of the impetus for why we got into this, the core fundamentals for what have really, I think, driven the success of this program, and the beginning stages of starting to take stock of what's out there and really understanding what's the art of the possible for the data sets at hand for us. We wanted to pause just for a moment and see if there's any questions that we could help answer just in regards to some of that upfront content. Sangeeta, let me just take a look at the chats. I don't know if,
Okay.
Oh, there we go. How do you ensure the data is accurate as you compile it? I think that's a great question.
Great question, Mike.
Yeah, Nigel, I could jump in for this one. It's involved a lot of testing, and accuracy is really important. It's a good call out, because if you're producing data and it's incorrect, you lose trust, and the moment you lose trust, it's kind of hard to gain it back. So it's honestly just about a lot of testing, comparing against different systems, and like what we personally prefer to do is work with the raw data, and because that's really the truth, and it's kind of aggregating upfront from there. So that's how we approach it. Again, the raw data, just constant testing, and just like, and not just testing once, just making sure just testing continuously, because things change, systems change, the way systems calculate things change. So you want to make sure that you're consistently evaluating the processes.
Yeah. And in a couple of moments, we're going to talk about the usability of these dashboards. So I think, as Arvin mentioned, you need them to be usable in a way that's streamlined and smooth. So when people open them up, they're not questioning what's gone into it. Is it accurate? Is it not? They just jump right to action. So that trust piece is absolutely critical. Good call. All right. I guess with no other questions, let's just keep moving. And just so you guys know, you're welcome to throw them into the chat as we go, and we can answer them. We have 2 more breaks set up, at least through the presentation and at the end too. So as mentioned, we've sort of taken you through that initial stages of the journey in terms of getting the data, organizing it, but now what do we do with it? So we wanted to pause in the I guess the story to talk a little bit about data lakes, because I think for me, data lakes has been a concept that's been often talked about in a couple of different enterprises I've had the opportunity to work for, but it's also, I think, very misunderstood. And what I mean by that is it's sort of this term that's thrown around as the solution to your data problems, but what really is it? So my simple-minded definition of what a data lake would be is it's truly just a central repository that's meant where you point all of your systems to it, it lives in the cloud, and it begins to collect and store and organize all of your data. The reciprocal benefit of that is that being it's living in the cloud, access to that, as soon as you grant it to anybody in your enterprise, has the ability to go in and glean insights from the valuable data that you house within your particular area. This also allows much easier cross-referencing across an organization when it comes to bringing data together to find what other new insights might exist that we didn't have access to before. Now, what you'll see too is that a data lake, I also, sorry, should have stopped and paused. I don't want to also sell a data lake as the be-all, end-all solution for an enterprise. It really depends on your size, your state, and ultimately I think the maturity of your back-end data team and your analytics team. As Arvin and I have professed, we are certainly not the experts when it comes to the architecture from an enterprise perspective, but I can say that very early days when we learned that our CRDM team was creating a data lake enterprise-wide, and we had the opportunity to be a part of that, we quickly hitched our wagon on because we saw some of the potential benefits. The other thing I didn't mention about data lakes is that data lives there live, meaning that as you pass information through your systems to it, it's accessible in almost a live manner, meaning that as opposed to before where you'd get static pulls, now you actually know that whatever you're seeing is the most current possible. And again, at a much bigger scale than before. So what we're showing here is just essentially it's an image that also articulates that a data lake doesn't just come out of nowhere. You essentially set up the strategy, you begin to catalog your information as Arvin and Jeff were doing early on, and then you plug your systems in. And this is really where the pond or the lake starts to grow. But it doesn't start as a lake. We have really what I would call here like a puddle, for example. But over time, as you add more systems, this gets to become something much more grand. And the other thing I wanted to highlight was in obviously sharing the fact that we work very closely with our data and analytics teams internally from an enterprise perspective. I reached out to them prior to this presentation to ask, is there anything specific you'd want us to share with the audience that just might build a little bit further beyond what we're sharing about the concept? And this is what we received back. And I think it's an awesome articulation of just sort of the potential and the trajectory of this type of thought train. You can see the 2 axes being data and users. On the left-hand side, essentially, you're always aiming to get as much as possible from an enterprise perspective into that lake. On the other axis, we're looking at really self-serving or self-serve usership, if that makes sense. So simply, how easy is it for others to get in there, access the information, and begin to drive their own insights on their own? And this is a much different situation than what you may have had in the past, where it was truly only the subject matter experts that had access to it and were analyzing. But you can see here clearly articulated, you beginning with some data puddles, if you will, growing into a data pond, data lake, and even the concept data ocean I hadn't heard before, but I think it makes perfect sense as you're really just growing in scale over time. Now, you got the data in the lake, it's organized, but it's sitting there. So what do you do with it? And that brings us to the visualization tool. And the visualization tool, the first thing I wanted to say is I want you to think of it like the face of your data strategy from a contact center perspective. Most of your end stakeholders aren't going to be in your lake. They're not going to be poking around there because it's relatively complex and technical. So we need to provide a relatively easy user interface to interact with this data. And whether it's Tableau, Power BI, QLic, they all serve a range of different purposes and specialties. Really what we're aiming for, though, is to make it easy to use and ultimately make it accessible to a wide range of people.
Yeah, and these tools are, again, I guess I'm biased, but I do really like them. For me, they're a lot of fun to use. Again, there's a couple of reasons for it. They're powerful, like the way kind of you get to feed information through and kind of analyze the information. It's really powerful, and like it again saves a ton of time from my perspective. So even before then having the data lake where it would automate the data stream going into it, I would just have to update a source to get my dashboards, all of them updated. So that was a lot of value for us from that area. However, the other elements I like a lot, and this is kind of like the fun aspect of things too, is like they're so customizable, and you get to really modify and design your dashboards in a way that they can look and feel really engaging, and can be a lot of value for your end users. Now, the tools itself, and first off, like I should say, like I don't know if anybody saw my mug, but we are a Tableau shop at CI. But all of these tools have gone to a point where they're super powerful and can add a lot of value there. But the way we've learned Tableau on our team, it's mostly been due through like experiential learning. And I know Nigel made the comment of me working after hours. Again, I find it fun, so he's just working around to try to figure out how these tools work and what's the best way I can make use of them. But that being said, the experiential learning is a very big component, and it's similar to Excel in a way that the basics are pretty easy to do up front. However, if you want to get good at it, you got to put in that time. That being said, there's a ton of resources out there. I know Tableau offers a great course that one of our newer analysts are going through. If you Google, there are answers to pretty much anything out there. And like, there's Reddit, which I personally prefer because there's a lot of people just their own experiences that they're putting in. But also, if any of you have any questions regarding these two, just like I would strongly suggest, reaching out to somebody, and even us. Like, I'm more than happy to discuss how we've learned and other kind of next stages or things we'd recommend. But what I'd say is like, okay, so once you have your visualization tool, moving on, it's what we really try to do is kind of create a visualization philosophy for us. And Nigel knows this. I don't show it as much, but I'm kind of competitive. So again, why this really comes into mind, it's like I really want the dashboards we're creating to stand out, right? And kind of be impactful and be memorable. And so to do that, there's kind of we kind of developed early on like a philosophy for the way we would create our dashboards. And I know that sounds a little much, but like the way it's kind of broken down into 4 parts. Your first part is the components you're building have to be purpose driven. So they're created in a way that they're clearly answering the question, a set of questions being asked. So again, the whole purpose behind this is to not clutter the dashboard with a ton of components, but rather have more meaningful components, fewer quality components rather than a quantity of the same ones. The next piece is the visuals. It's really important for us for our visuals to be attractive and clear. And so I think Nigel mentioned it before, we're very visual people, we're visual beings, right? So we operate a lot on what we see. So it's really important for us that we make these dashboards attractive and make people want to use them. And it kind of feeds into that next point is now that they're visual, they also are intuitive. So we don't have to train people how to use the things we're building. Rather, it should just come to them. Oh, I should click this section to do Y or whatnot. So that intuitive factor is also very important. And the final piece, which kind of ties together some of the other elements, is the consistency and the familiarity. How we go about that is essentially having that in our mindset that if you use one of our dashboards, you pretty much can use all of them. So we want that feel to be consistent across the board. And one of the ways we go about this is using a template that we've created for us to help drive that consistency. So as you see here, this is the template that we use for most of our dashboards now. I'll highlight a few quick elements just so you know. So for some of the, to highlight some of the reasoning behind it. First would be colors. Colors, we have different brands we build for within CI. Our call center, we have two areas. We have our manufacturing side and our dealerships, and our dealership support side, our head office there. And so again, different branding for the different areas. Sizing wise, there's a specific reason behind how we've sized these dashboards, and it's 16 by 9. So users, as a lot of them use PowerPoint, can easily copy and paste images into their PowerPoint deck if they need to refer to it. You see the bottom right, all of our dashboards have that consistent navigation. So the big buttons are dashboard level navigation, and the home button takes you across multiple dashboards. And then finally, you have your top right corner, which is another button which brings that drop down you see, where it contains all of your filters and all of your disclaimers. So it's a consistent way of interacting with what you have. And yeah, all of these together really help us stay true to that philosophy. And I don't know, Nigel, you as a user, you've used a lot of these dashboards we've built. I don't know, any thoughts around that?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like when I think about the learning that we've taken along this, and the reason that we feel it's important is you might be asking questions of, well, why are we talking about marketing theory or website design theory? But when it comes down to it, it's the usability. And are people actually going to pick it up and use it if you've spent the time building all of this way up to this particular stage? If it's not meeting their needs and they're not logging in, that's a lot of wasted time. And when I think about sort of the end user base that we're trying to account for, I'm probably your lowest common denominator. I'm a squirrel. My head's all over the place. I'm busy. I don't have enough time to jump in to really think about things. So I need you to serve it up for me in a way that's super easy, something that I recognize. And if there's something new, holy, I hope it's intuitive. So I can't impress upon you how important this is. And as I say, I don't think we even anticipated this to be such a critical piece, but it's something I'm so thankful that we took the time up front and that we had alignment on that competitive edge, I guess, side that we both approach things with. But with that, we wanted to take just another moment to pause and see if there had been any new questions come into the thread. I'm just scrolling through myself. Oh, there's one. So Arvin, this will be for you, and you'll quickly realize, everyone, the brains behind the operation is Mr. Kachadorian. Are you using Excel for much of your data compilation? If so, do you get around, how do you get around workbooks slowing down due to having too much data formulas?
So that's a great question, and right now we're actually transitioning away mostly from that Excel based of tracking to more of that the data lake side of things, where all of our feed into dashboards comes straight from a lake, so we don't actually have to worry about that Excel the slowness. However, what we did, and we still, for certain elements we still do have to deal with that, and what we found helped with that whole slowness is, making the files as flat as possible, removing the formulas. You are restricted with Excel as how many rows you can have, so like using a CSV if needed. But again, like my thoughts sometimes goes like, if you're finding that you're having too much rows, maybe there's another way of kind of going forward with it. Maybe you need to aggregate that information into a separate flat file and refer back to it. Or again, if a data lake is an option, that might be another way to kind of approach it to connect to it. And that being said, there are certain tools that you necessarily don't even need a data lake in, if that's an option for you to maybe directly connect to maybe your telephony provider through an API. That might be another way to kind of work around it. I don't know if that answered the question, Sean.
Hope so. Oh, awesome. And yeah, that's been a big learning for me too, Arvin, the optimization side of things. And I think you also touched on the thinking outside the box. We have this problem, we can't fit this much through the pipe. So how are we gonna almost break it up or look at it from a different perspective to get it through?
For sure. And Nigel, that's a good call too, because like you got to think out of the box, but also you got to think, hey, what's relevant too? Are all the data points relevant? And the more you have, it's like you don't necessarily need all of it too. So that's the other area where our upfront work of figuring out what we keep and what we don't keep kind of does help reduce that strain, right?
Very good point. So we're now going to sort of shift out of the theory world, and we're going to move into a bit of a practical example of some of the work that we've actually accomplished in the last year and a half. So we'll take it from that lessons learned to what have we actually done. And wanted to start with project code name Oracle. So The first thing I want to talk about is the intent of this project. So when we set out with Oracle, the idea was we have a lot of information, we're building a data lake strategy. How do we get to be a part of that to leverage the power of it in terms of the analytics and the real-time nature? And what do we really want to show? And ultimately we decided that we wanted to really develop a 360 perspective of our client. We want to provide custom tailored information to all levels of our organization and really hone in on the KPIs that are relevant to their particular group. But that started with a cool code name. And I got to get that across first. Arvin has taught me you can't have a data project without a cool code name. But that's truly what the word Oracle was trying to accomplish, in that we were really wanting it to be an all-seeing dashboard network that you could provide to not only contact center leadership, but all the way through our team leaders, to obviously the most important part of our contact centers being our frontline agents. And that's really what we've aimed, I guess, to achieve as part of this. Which takes us to.
And then this map has been a key one for us. And basically this is showing what we plan for Oracle, and it's basically a dashboard architecture that's a one-stop shop for all of the data in client services. So as a user, I can go in there and access, like any relevant information that's coming out of client services. So it goes from all those areas that we identified early on, brings it into one section, and then as user I can connect with each one and access. And the way it's set up, I'll go through it now. When one element I will call out is, because we're so disaggregated with our data, it allows us to build layers. And so on the most disaggregated level, you have like the FSR or the agent level, which again, each of their calls kind of represents a line. But grouping agents together, you'll have a service team level, and then grouping it up, service center, and then continuously all the way up to the department. And the reason we've kind of done these rows is because we have different users and different stakeholders have different needs. So that's kind of the whole reasoning behind those layers you see. Within the layers, you have things we call a data stream. And I don't know if a data stream is a term anywhere else, but we've kind of adopted it for Oracle. And there are 5 distinct data streams that we've created. And a data stream, is how we define it, is like a set of related information that we would build those dashboards from. And the 5 we have set up is case and contact management stream, which it looks at our telephony and our ticketing databases. We have our compliance and knowledge stream, which looks at our quality assurance, our our knowledge database, our training information. We have our WFO stream, which looks at our workforce management stream data and like from the information coming out of that tool. Our VOC stream, which has all of our post-call survey feedback, our feedback that our agents are collecting, and our cool new like natural language processing, which probably deserves its own session maybe down the road. And then our final item is our customer 360 stream, which looks to paint our client's journey through their interactions with our client services teams. And yeah, so putting that all together, what it does, it essentially creates an area where, and it like how I often like refer to it as, it creates a website where stakeholders from client services can go in and access anything that's relevant to them, and whether it be for coaching or making big picture decisions.
Mm-hmm. And like Arvin, I remember the meeting when this was presented. It was a little over a year ago. We're early stages of the pandemic. We know there's potential in data. And I remember you presented this to me before we shared it with our executives and just being wowed. But this was the tipping point for us. This was the time where I think we took it from concept of, okay, I see you can merge data together faster, but what are we doing with it? Or the theory that we were really sharing with them, this was okay, now I can actually see how this is going to add value to my center. And I think that's when the momentum really started to pick up. So I love this slide. I'll probably frame it and hang it on the wall at some point, just because it's I think it's such a critical component. And that's the North Star we talked about, right? It's the thing that gets everyone mobilized and heading in the same direction. Now, when you think of those different streams, we don't necessarily approach them all at once. We want to make sure that we're building them diligently, that we're putting intent into them, and that we're meeting the end goal, as think we've drilled in enough at this point. But the way that we approach each of those particular blocks is consistent. So it always begins with an initial touch point, trying to understand, first off, what's in the lake, what's available to us. Secondly, what are the questions that we're trying to answer? And is there any suggestions as to ways that we'd like to see that displayed? Arvin and team take that and they essentially digest it and translate it into what we would call a foundational build or a 0.1. And this is essentially something that we're trying to spin up as quickly as possible with the goal of getting it in the hands of our end users so that they can chew on it, see what they like about it, what they don't like about it, and getting us to stage 3, which is probably the most important of all 4, in getting feedback. Because again, we're going to try, we're going to come up with some best guesses, creative thinking outside the box, and sometimes it's going to hit and other times it won't. But again, if we left it as the ones that didn't, no one would log into those dashboards ever again, and that would be a lot of wasted effort. So you might go through a few cycles in stage 3, iterative improvements, sort of adding to it, taking away, and that will eventually lead to the full build and evolution. And that really is what I would define as your first production build. It's the first one that you've determined as acceptable, and you'll begin deploying it and giving access to the appropriate end users within the organization. But again, wouldn't even call that the end. This is just the end of the initial build, and then you'll continue to iterate on it from there.
Yeah, and Nigel, like looking at an example of that process, you see here kind of the stages we go through for creating a dashboard, and it always starts off rough, and it helps you be creative and kind of make sure you're not going down a rabbit hole and like creating things that might not be used. And when I say rough, I literally mean I most of the time I have my Surface next to me and I pick it up, I draw an idea, and you show it to your stakeholders, and like that constant feedback is going to be key throughout this process. And so again, others might create a PowerPoint like we see here, or if depending on like your skill level, you might even be able to build something really quickly just to kind of on Tableau to kind of get a feel for what we're trying to accomplish basically. And then once the rough mock-up is kind of approved by everybody and you kind of have a good feel, we go to that 0.1. And that 0.1 build, again, it's not meant to be pretty. It's not meant to be the final product. No, it's just meant to get the prototype basically in the hands of your users. And then constantly iterate that based off the new feedback, the new items coming through. And then once you feel comfortable enough, once you feel like you've answered a lot of the key questions, it's just when you move it into the production build, and you kind of more focus on visuals, making sure it's operating okay, everything is coded properly. And the one thing I will call out here is that, and I know Nigel briefly touched on it too, is like that it's still the start, right? And that's why I enjoy numbers. It kind of constantly pushes you to go forward, because version 1 is just a start, but there's an infinite amount of numbers that you can kind of go and increase to. So it's always pushing you forward, right? And yeah, Nigel, I don't know, thoughts? Maybe we should kind of move into like that live example and kind of show what we've an example of something we've built.
Yeah, I think that would be perfectly appropriate at this stage. And what we're going to show you is some of the initial builds that we've built into Project Oracle. And I know Arvin's preloaded them with some dummy data, so we can just sort of show you the dashboard functionality and essentially what's available there. I'll stop sharing my screen for a second, Arvin, just to allow you to pull yours up.
All right. Did that work?
Awesome. We're good.
Awesome. All right. So yeah, so this is a telephony dashboard we've built, and so it falls within that case and contact management data stream. And as Nigel mentioned, this is built with some dummy data for a few months worth, and it is intended to show some of the features and functionalities of the tool. Again, this is built specifically for certain stakeholders, so all the preferences and how everything is laid out is meant to address how they want things to look. So we're sitting on the overview page right now, and what you'll see is on the top level you have your KPIs, and these are the KPIs they want to see at a high level. And then in the middle section you have like some more volume information as to where the volume is coming from and who's handling it or what queues are taking it. And in the bottom section aims to add a bit more color as to what kind of information, who's calling and what kind of things they're calling about. And it's just that's just kind of an overview of the page. Some of the functionality and some things we've already discussed is, you can interact with the dashboard, and Tableau has something called tooltips where you hover over an item or you can click on it, however you set it up, and you can get additional pieces of information. So as a user here, I can hover over the handle and see, hey, my inbound calls, my outbound calls, my average daily and my average handle. Again, these are all customly put in. So you can adjust these depending on what you hover over. So let's say I hover over queue time. I get like my max queue time, my average queue answer time, my average queue abandon time. So all of that can be inputted there. One piece I did forget to mention is that this is one of the dashboards that's connected to the lake. So I technically don't have to do anything for this. It's just updates by itself. And it's one of the jokes I make, and I think Nigel's tired of this joke. It's like these dashboards are built in a way that like I'm trying to put myself out of a job, right? So that's kind of the end goal there. Other ways.
You love working with me so much.
Yeah,
Put yourself
exactly.
out of a job. Yeah.
So that's some of the high level tooltips. If you want to go more advanced with your tooltips, you can go over other rules, and like you can add tables into them. So in this case, this looks at our again, that contact lens, our NLP information, and the rules that are being triggered under call handling subcategory. Other ways you can interact with it is like, let's say we built a prompt in for the user. So in this middle section, the dark blue tells you your inbound calls, the light blue tells you your outbound calls, and the little orange here tells you your calls that were abandoned. We had an ask come through like, hey, I want to pick a KPI to see on top of these few values. I'm like, sure. Actually, Jeff built this. He's like, sure, we can definitely do that. And so he overlaid an additional component. And right now it's set to callbacks, but let's say we want to look at something like the, say, service level. What it'll do, it'll change the line. It'll just throw it on top of this and update the information for the user. So I can now see that, oh, actually around 2 o'clock, it looks like, our service levels dropping. We have more abandoned calls, and it could just be after lunch, but it helps you drive quick insights there. So that's the overview page. You also have, as we mentioned in the template, a filter area, which is on the top right section here. So this allows you to do your date change or any filters that are related to the dashboard. Since we're on a telephony dashboard, a lot of these filters are telephony related. But again, these allow you to do easy, simple changes. So let's say I want to look at just the June data. I'll go from June 1st to June 10th, and my information will all filter accordingly. Let's see. And let's say I only want to look at maybe a few queues. I don't know which queues we're selecting, and hopefully they have data in it. And let's see. Is that guess
Fun of a
okay?
live demo.
Oh, exactly.
What do we got?
Let's see if it worked. There you go. So as you can see, the queues quickly filtered. It changed all the components. You can see all this piece of information changed as well. So it's a quick way of interacting with your information. Kind of highlighting some of the navigation pieces on the bottom right section. We've only added three views for this dashboard for this demo, but right now we're on the overview page. You can go into a more detailed view, or I think we'll jump into Nigel's favorite, which is the heat map. And I think even practicing for this demo, this presentation today, I remember there was one session we went in. I think we ended up wasting the entire session just like going through different like versions of this. So I don't know how effective we are in meetings together, but that's a sign.
I love.
But again, this one, yeah, we put the power into the hands of the user. So right now it's a very simple heat map. Right on the left side, on the rows, you see the morning, lunchtime, afternoon, and at the bottom you see the columns. But again, let's put the power into the hands of the user. Let the user decide what they want to see. So maybe the columns we do weekday, and then for the rows, I think I like to put hour. I find hour to be pretty cool. And let's say right now we're looking at callbacks, but let's say we want to look into our handled calls. And again, this is for this time period from April 1st to June 10th, but you can adjust that as well as all the other filters. But looking at this, now I can quickly tell you that it looks like on Tuesdays is when I get the most calls, and looks like at 3 o'clock, 3 to 4, I get most calls. Let's say we want to dive a bit deeper into that too. Let's say specific half hour. If we really wanted to get there, we can do that. And it's just, again, it's a really fun and quick way of interacting with your information. So like I have all that information there again. We've added tooltips as well. So you hover over and you get a ton of information that could be a lot of value to the user.
And visualizations like this, Arvin, so the reason I love it is, again, simple-minded guy, simple basis of a visualization, but the amount of insights you can pull out of this is almost unlimited. And as Arvin referenced, as we were practicing for this, I started questioning, what should our hours of operation be? Is there any need to change them? And I started, poking around and digging a bit. And that's the power of this, right? It's you see an initial set of information, and as a business leader or strategist, you're going to have questions or you're going to have more things that you'd like to uncover. And being able to navigate on your own is what the power of this really is. So I couldn't agree more, Arvin. It's pretty awesome. It gets me excited.
Yeah, it's a fun. Again, this is a fun part of it, and again, I lose a lot of time with this, just transparently, because you have a ton of fun with this, clicking on stuff. The last element I do want to just quickly highlight before we move on is the other navigation piece. Yes, we have our internal navigation, but for Oracle, we need to navigate across dashboards. So this one's again still in beta, as we're still early on in this journey. But you click on the home button, you can navigate to your other dashboards you've built. So let's navigate over to another, like we have another dashboard that we set up for this presentation here. So if you click on it, you'll get a quick access into that other dashboard. And so it's very simple for the user going from one area to the other. And so this is like a vacation tracker we put together for our WFM team, so they can keep track of, hey, how many vacations do we still need to book, or sick days and whatnot. So all of this is, again, it just goes to show you that, hey, the power of like these tools, and really taking all that effort away from some of the people who used to have to build these reports in the past, and rather than having them focus on building the reports, have them focus on analyzing the output, right?
Exactly. It's about being in the moment, right? You have a need in the moment that you need to make a decision. And that's typically where I think in the past we'd start a data strategy or we'd start building it. Now it's, here's the information, let's act on it, which is a totally different narrative than I think we've had in the past.
For sure. Nigel, I'm going to ask you, like, take the screen share. Otherwise, I'll keep playing with this one, and I'll just keep going on with this heat map.
Absolutely. And I know we're coming close to the top of the hour. So where we're at, I guess, in our journey is we just wanted to share sort of a wrap up, I guess, to the story that we've been working through. We'll start with my, I think, fairly unique vantage point, where I'm working quite heavily with Arvin and closely with him, but I also have the opportunity to interact with executives across our organization, and ultimately I become a bit of a salesman for this work. So wanted to share that some of the first things that you begin to pick up as you deploy these dashboards is obviously the reduced work effort. I think that we've made abundantly clear. Even just that vacation tracker, I've gone through exercises in the past where we'd spend a week trying to compile where vacations were and where they were outstanding. Now it's just dashboard. And I think through that automation and providing it to our stakeholders, we're not only speeding ourselves up, but we're speeding up our partners as well. And with that piece of trust we've spoken about, it's actually driven a higher degree of confidence, because we've put such a focus on that, where you see now, as I mentioned, you're able to jump in, make a decision confidently versus almost mitigating some of those decisions you're making because you may have had an element of just unsure. The other piece is that now, being that we're giving this power to end users, and we've alluded to this, you're getting a lot more creativity just through the notion of adding more people to the fold. Myself, Arvin, we're obviously going to come with as many different ideas as possible, but by adding Jeff in, and then by adding Vivek in, and more, even just in our team, we see an exponential growth of ways that we can analyze this. But think about giving it to our stakeholders, and then just the ideas that they'll come back to us with. And I think that has created this whole new frontier of insights that are completely possible to us now. We can do things like, we can understand, just one top of mind, how an engaged employee drives an engaged and ultimately satisfying interaction with our clients. We'll have the data to run true trending tests, understand what the correlation is, to help us drive staffing and engagement strategies. The last couple of points I would mention is that this has created stronger KPIs in our centers, meaning our agents, our leaders all have a very clear understanding of where they currently sit from a performance standpoint. And the biggest benefit of this all is I feel like it's driven stronger cross-team collaboration. And it's twofold. It's on one hand, because we're reaching out, we're partnering, and we're offering the support to these end users. But at the same time, you actually, if you think about it, the people that are digesting this information in the past, they were creating their own analysis and coming to the table with a story that often was met with disparate or different stories from other users in the organization. Now everyone's reading from the same rap sheet. And what that does is it puts you on the same page up front, and it actually accelerates your ability to have conversations and make those strategic decisions when you need to. So I think just from that vantage point, this has been an absolute pleasure of a journey. From a management executive perspective. And I think, Arvin, you've also picked up just a ton of learnings along the way too, right?
For sure. And like a few of them I want to highlight again, like first off, a lot of this wouldn't be possible with like the incredible like effort and work everybody on the teams have been putting in. Like, and everybody's been like a huge proponent for getting all of this going forward. Some of the other areas that we can, it falls along with the themes that we mentioned throughout the presentation. One thing I find helps is organization. Being organized with everything can really help you adjust to the change, and with everything going on, it really helps you stay focused. Next is really understanding your tool, and that's that comes with time and understanding its limits and boundaries. The good thing is they're pretty broad, but knowing what you can and can't do really helps you go forward. And one of the benefits I found is like knowing the limits of a tool. If somebody asks me, hey, can we do X or can we do Y? It's much easier for me to say yes, and this is how we can go forward with it, right? Next piece is around that creativity aspect of things. You gotta have fun with it. I don't know. I have fun with this all the time, so that's why I enjoy it a lot. But you got to have fun with it. Be creative. Be adventurous. Like simple things can like go a long way. So like, don't be afraid to like make mistakes and like learn from them, because that's all in the end going to be very important for your journey. Internet is your friend, and what I mean by that is like, hey, like don't be afraid to like Google. Like I Google everything, and it's as bad as it sounds. I Google everything, just again to learn, but also just to validate certain elements of things. Feedback, as mentioned, and I know we've drilled that a lot, and having some CX background as well, it's like it's very important, right? Feedback is going to really get your users to buy in and build that trust in what you're producing. And then the last piece, and I know I'm guilty that I don't always do this, but it's whenever I do this, it goes the longest. It's you got to start simple, and like start simple and then grow it with your stakeholders. Trying to go down the rabbit hole, which Nigel has caught me a few times because I have gone down the rabbit hole a few times. But like it does help when you start simple and then you build it up with your stakeholders.
Absolutely. Arvin, can't thank you and the team enough. It's been just a joy the last year and a half. And again, I'm still excited because I know we're midway through. And just for everybody listening in, thank you sincerely for your time today. I hope we were able to at least share, excuse me, share just a bit of some of the learnings, the key components that if you're beginning this, or you're at the beginning stages of the journey, that will help you out a bit. I know both of us are more than open to obviously correspond offline if you have any questions that we can help with more specifically. But yeah, the intent is just to help raise the bar across our organization because we see a ton of value in this space. And I guess with that, we'll open up for any other, I guess, outstanding questions that we can help with before we close down.
I see there's a question from Sean. Nigel, you want to handle that?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Sangita. Arvin, you mentioned using Reddit sometimes to help to find help with reporting. Is there a particular subreddit you visit for this help? Also, will these slides be available after the session? So I'll answer the second part. I don't mind sharing the slides with you. So I know Sangita has a copy, so we can have them sent over to you. No problem.
As for the first part, I actually just use a Tableau, general Tableau one, or just search for the posts. The other element outside of Reddit too it's incredibly helpful is the Tableau forums itself. Like any question you can think of, somebody's already probably asked it, and I find it super useful. And again, we refer to it all the time.
We get through Tableau the same way I got through university. Google.
Pretty much.
Any other questions that we can help with at this point? I know we both got unique names, so it should be easy to find us on LinkedIn if you do have any questions after the fact.
Yeah, you guys really did a great job, Arvin and Nigel. Wow. You know, I wrote in the chat, I've never been this interested in data. Usually it goes here, but you were so passionate. It came through loud and clear. Yeah, you're getting lots of thank yous. So yes, I want to give you guys both a big round of applause because your passion came through big time. And thank you for adding value to our community. I know it is greatly appreciated, and we'll share this with others. So thank you. Before we wrap up, we have another event on June 16th for those interested in learning about remote onboarding and training. We have a second session there. We just had one that was amazing. And Mike, if you want to share, on June 24th, we have a session, and you can check that out on GTACC.ca, or if Mike's able to pop in, go right ahead. Or did he? Oh yeah, he put it on in the chat. So Mike's put the upcoming events in the chat. So other than that, we are done. And you guys, thank you so much, Arvin and Nigel, once again.
Pleasure.
Great. And you know, you kept me interested through the whole thing. And this is not even my area. So imagine the people who really get it all. So thank you so much. Yeah, you're getting some claps here. So
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your week or the weekend. And thank you, Arvin, again. And thank you so much, Nigel.
Thanks, Sangeeta. It's a
problem.
pleasure. Happy Friday, all.
Happy
Happy
Friday.
Friday.
Bye,
Bye-bye,
guys.
everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Okay, bye-bye. Bye, Umberto.